Hello and welcome to my BookTube channel, Jack and the Book Stack, where I talk about a wide variety of book genres and the bookish lifestyle. Today I have my April reading wrap-up for you. I'm going to talk about all the books that I read this month. There are 16 of them, but I'm going to rank them in terms of how much I enjoyed them. They're ranked from worst to best, and they're categorized in 3 ways: books that I disliked, liked, and loved. Reading 16 books in a month is unbelievably amazing, particularly because I spread them out across a wide variety of genres, and that balance is something that I really need to keep engaged and motivated to keep reading. But what is really cool is how many pages that I read this month. I read over 8,000 pages in the month of April, which is the second most that I have ever read. The most I ever read was in January of this year, and which makes sense because I read 31 books in 31 days, and I read over 11,200 pages then. But still, this is insane for April, and I gotta be honest with you, I'm feeling pretty burnt out. When I started April, I said I was in the mood to vlog, and so I started out the month very motivated. But I think the problem was, even though I was in the mood to film and share my life with you guys, having dedicated reading vlogs where I was reading an entire trilogy or one book in particular, having those dedicated vlogs was very confining, and so it was a difficult month in terms of burnout. Especially because I was doing so many other things. I did a challenge, the Whole30 diet or cleanse challenge, and I was working out a lot and putting a high priority on those things. And that turned out well, by the way. I finished the 30 days. I lost 8 pounds and 2 inches off my waist, which was pretty cool. And I'm not going to maintain it forever because you eliminate a lot of things from your diet, which is just hard to keep up with. But I did learn about a lot of healthy substitutes and how to reduce my portions and everything. So the whole challenge was a really great thing. I also started back up with my language studies, so I started taking Spanish classes again, and I will be ramping that up. So I'm not going to be reading at this rate going forward. 16 books is great. The page count was a little bit overkill, and I'm feeling pretty exhausted. Even though I was pushing myself to the limits in April for number of pages read, most of the books I really enjoyed reading, so it was successful in that regard. But there was one book that I disliked reading in April, and that book was Just Like Mother, a thriller horror novel by Anne Heltzel. I picked up Just Like Mother because I thought it was a horror book that revolved around cults, and I did a cult reading vlog in April. However, it wasn't as much horror as it was a suspenseful thriller, and there were some elements I enjoyed. The theme of motherhood as a cult and the pressures that women face to fit into this box of motherhood. You have to want children. How could you not want children? And it has to be the defining element of your life and all these things. I liked the theory of that. The execution did not land with me. I do not like the direction the plot went. I thought our main character was kind of a moron and insufferable to read from, and the author did not do the theme justice, in my opinion, so I didn't like the book. Next, let's talk about the books that I read in April that I liked. So the one that I liked the least was Don Quixote, a classic by Cervantes. Don Quixote is one that I did a dedicated reading vlog for, where I talked about my annotation strategy, more about what the book is about, what I liked, what I didn't like as much, so there are more details in that vlog if you want to check it out. But just to summarize here, love the tone of this, the humor and the banter between Don Quixote, who is a 50-ish-year-old man who loves reading, and he loves reading stories about knights and honor and chivalry. He's addicted to that, and he gets in this delusion that he is a knight, and he is insane and just pictures normal things around him as magnificent things. So a roadside inn is actually a castle, and such a great book of intention, having the best of intentions but messy outcomes. And him and his squire, their banter was really fun, and great themes in this. Really enjoyed those elements, but it is 1,000 pages. And it felt very much like a TV sitcom where there's so many episodes and like each episode is its own contained story. It was hard to keep going because the overarching plot was just like so broad. We meet these side characters and then the side characters go off on their own little plot lines. And so it was exhausting. It was exhausting to read. And you can see I annotated half of it because the things I were tabbing, while accurate, they were just so common. I was like, I could have tabbed every single page, and I kind of needed to just power through it at a point because I liked it, but I liked it the least, right? So it was just too long for me. A book that I enjoyed slightly more than that was the audiobook I listened to for Natural Beauty, a literary horror book by Ling Huang. Natural Beauty is about a young woman who grew up with Chinese immigrant parents who always encouraged her to love music and play the piano, and it was something she was really great at until there was a tragic accident and she couldn't bring herself to play anymore. Now that she's an adult, she is working at like a health spa in New York, and it's a very unique one. And it requires her to try all of their treatments, use their products at home for like skincare regime, and her appearance starts to change. And so this really has commentary on beauty standards and how the beauty standard is really like the same thing. Like everybody just starts to look the same. And, you know, something might not be quite right with where she's working. This was a very slow-paced horror, and that's why I say it's more of like a literary horror. Quiet commentary. It does have some body stuff, but not even like body horror, but we're talking about like changing appearances and whatnot. So that's really what this one was about. This one is hard for me to talk about in terms of like my reaction to it. I liked it. It's in the liked category. I did want to see what would happen next. I don't know if I was comparing this too much to Rouge by Mona Awad. It's another book that I've read recently about the beauty standard, and that one had more of like a horror element to it, more of like this fever dream element, this really weird tone to it. And maybe I was expecting that from Natural Beauty, and maybe it was like more thriller almost. Maybe that's what it is that threw me off. It was okay. I was interested in the plot. I was interested in the direction it went. I didn't exactly predict everything. The ending felt rushed to me. It wasn't as weird as I wanted, but it was okay. A book that I liked more than that was Such Sharp Teeth, a werewolf horror novel by Rachel Harrison. In Such Sharp Teeth, we have a 27-year-old female main character who leaves her big city job, dreams, lifestyle to take care of her pregnant sister in the small town that they grew up in. Very small town vibes where everybody gossips, everybody knows everybody's business. She also reconnects with like her childhood best friend, so there's like a love story growing there because, you know, we've always had feelings for each other. But when she's back, she gets attacked, like out on the street alone, and she gets bitten. And then she gets really weird side effects from this bite. And I mean, it's a werewolf novel, so you can guess what she was bitten by. So this is like a contemporary story about her turning into a werewolf and dealing with it. And it's kind of funny because I'm not going to say that she just accepts it. You know, it's kind of a big thing, like learning how to change your life to deal with this weird situation. But she handles it pretty well. Doesn't seem to be as big of a deal. But it's just like her grappling with it, and also like how does she move on? How does she have a romance given this situation? So I kind of liked it. It was, I don't know if I'd call it cozy horror. There was definitely some gruesome body stuff as she's turning into a werewolf, like how she transitions, like how her bones kind of like crack and break, and it's very painful. And there's some gore with like when she kills animals and eats them. So there's like a little bit, but it's not too bad, but I also wouldn't call it cozy. There was nothing done for like shock value either. So it's kind of middle in the road as terms of horror goes. What lands us in the lower end of the liked category is I hated the female main character. She was stupid. She was so stupid. Like so many things were showing up, like presenting themselves that would have like answered a lot of questions, and she was just ignoring them. And then she's one of those that's like, well, he could never love me because I'm this monster, so I'm gonna ignore him and ghost him, and I'm not even gonna bother. And she was just such a brat. I don't know why this guy was interested in her. I didn't like her. I didn't like her, but I liked the plot, and I liked the relationship she had with her sister. I also liked the parallels of them both feeling similar things, like losing control of your emotions, your body, your life. So her sister was dealing with that, her body changing through pregnancy and then giving birth, and then she was saying like her life was no longer her own because she would be a mother. And that's the same with our main character, right? Her body changing, not being in control, not living the life that she had intended. So I liked the parallels there with like motherhood, but it was okay. The next book that I liked reading in April was The Reformatory, a historical horror by Tananarive Due. Wow, this was a powerful audiobook for a lot of different reasons. This is set in Jim Crow, Florida. So segregation is very, very prominent, and Black people do not have rights. They're not treated very well. That is a horror story in itself. But we follow the two children of this man who was really fighting for the rights of Black people, and he was actually chased out of town. But his two children remained, and they're kind of facing the consequences of their father. Not consequences that he did anything wrong, but just the hatred geared towards their father is now being geared towards them. And so the son ends up in a reformatory school. I mean, that's where the title comes from. And the sister is trying to get him out because this reformatory has a horrible reputation and not everybody makes it out of there. So she's trying to get him out. He is in there and he is dealing with a lot of stuff. Like, he sees ghosts in there. Actually, it's not just him. A lot of people see these spirits or these ghosts. So he's dealing with a lot of unfair treatment from like the adults, like the warden and the guards. Like, that has its own horrors. The kids that he has to interact with there, that is a whole set of horrors. And then he has the actual horrors of like the ghosts that are terrifying him. And so there's so many layers of horror to this. Paranormal, historical, there's so much going on here. It was fantastic. I did feel like it was very, very long though, and I thought the ending was satisfying. It definitely escalated in the plot, but some of it I felt was kind of slow for me. But it wasn't bad. I really liked it. It did feel like it was as long as it was. The next book that I liked reading in April was Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism, a nonfiction written by Amanda Montell. I also read this for my cult-themed reading vlog while I was doing my spring cleaning, and I thought this was a fantastic introduction to cult-like behavior translated for modern-day things that a lot of us can associate with. So not only did it talk about actual cults that, you know, maybe have a compound or had like a mass unalive situation, or like those kinds of cults that we think of, like the extremists, but also modern day stuff like Soul Cycle, Alcoholics Anonymous, the Peloton stuff. My favorite part was talking about how companies that we work for can be considered cults with their rah rah, go team go, pep talks, and their specific language and the us versus them type stuff. So I thought it was a great introduction and great concepts were introduced, but the book tried to do so much, like it was so broad that it didn't give me as much information as I would like to continue thinking about these topics. So it's like, it gave me a taste. It was like an appetizer and I want like a full meal. I want to understand more. So great introduction that I enjoyed reading, but not quite enough. The next book that I read that I liked in April was An Honest Lie, a thriller by Taryn Fisher. Again, I read this for my cult-themed reading vlog, and in An Honest Lie, we have two timelines. We have a young woman who's dealing with the consequences of a childhood where she grew up in a cult, and some thrilling things are happening to her as a result of that. But then we also flash back to when she was 13, when her and her mother joined this cult, what drove them to join it, what it was actually like, how they were manipulated, how they tried to escape, how they were trapped. I really loved the flashback timeline when she was 13. I thought that was so thrilling. If the story was just that, I would have loved this book. But I did not like the present day when she was an adult. I thought it was too far-fetched of a plot, like how the consequences from back in the day are like coming back to her now. I thought it was so dumb, and I didn't care about any of it. We are getting to the top of the liked list now, so I guess you could say I really, really liked these next books. Next on the list is The Only One Left, a thriller by Riley Sager. I am a sucker for a good atmosphere in a book, particularly a thriller or a horror. And that's exactly why I picked this one up, because it is about a young woman who is a caregiver, and she gets a new job taking care of a client that's in this isolated manor at the edge of a cliff. And first of all, love that setting, like old mansions or manors, isolated. But then you add on this really creepy element that the person she's taking care of is known around town for being the only one left after her entire family was very gruesomely killed. And everyone suspects that she did it because she was the only one left when she was 17, I think. So now she's an old woman and she's like an invalid. She can't move her body. She can only move her left hand. Her mind is still active though. So our main character is kind of terrified going into this situation. Then we also have an element of a book within a book, which I adore, because this woman can use her one hand so she can type on a typewriter. And she says, I want to tell you my story. I want to tell you what really happened that night. And so they're piecing it together. And I really loved all those elements. Like that alone is why I picked up the book. It delivered in those aspects. So I liked those characteristics. However, our main character was so stupid. So stupid. And I was screaming at the pages at how stupid she was and some of the things she just missed. I'm like, something major happened. And she's like, oh, that's weird. And she just like moves on and never like thinks about it again. And then something similar happens and I'm like, okay, girl, come on, figure this out. And then something I really, really cringe with in books is when it's a mystery type story and our amateur person, who's not a detective by any means, starts accusing people of crimes and interrogating them. And these people just answer to her like she has some authority. I'm like, why would they talk to you? And also, I don't like when they like accuse everybody and then put all their suspicions out there. Like, you just trust everyone, or like trust them not to retaliate against you, or it's just so frustrating. So that's what dropped us from the loved category to the liked category, because our main character narrator was just so flippin' obnoxious. The twist in this is something that I have seen many times, so it truly made me roll my eyes. I was so disappointed it went that direction. However, there were some other twists that I really, really enjoyed. So lots of different threads coming together and different twists, like subplot twists, I guess, or just other elements of it that I really enjoyed. It was kind of outrageous. Like if you're gonna read this, like suspend your disbelief a little bit and just enjoy the ride. The read that I enjoyed the most in the month of April was the Rook and Rose Trilogy, a complex fantasy written by M.A. Carrick. I have a dedicated reading vlog for this trilogy, which I really, really hope that you check out, because I talk about each book, my reaction to it, and what kind of reader I recommend this trilogy to. So I hope you check out that vlog. But just to summarize this trilogy that I liked the most in April, I love the characters, I love the tone and how the book made me feel, I love the reluctant allies aspect, not quite found family, but maybe a little bit, and all the things these characters did for each other. I love a con artist trope and secret identities, so this trilogy has all those things. What drops us from the loved category to the liked category is that it was such a complex magic system. I was really confused a lot of times. There were a lot of side characters to keep track of, a lot of political maneuvering that was hard to keep track of as well, but I did really enjoy it. So please check out that vlog so you can find out more about what this trilogy is about and who should read it to see if you should check it out. Now let's talk about the books that I loved reading in the month of April. At the bottom of the list, but still a book that I loved reading, Words of Radiance, Book 2 in the Stormlight Archive fantasy series by Brandon Sanderson. Ooh boy, do I get the hype for this one. I love this book. So what holds me back from this being like the #1 book in this ranking is I'm still really confused by the magic. I'm understanding a little bit more, like with Syl, for example, that's a magical creature element I'm understanding a lot more. And I understand the battle that we're in, this war that's being fought, and it's kind of cool like how fantasy plays a role in that. But I don't like reading 1,000 pages per book, so we're like 2,000 pages in, and still feeling like I'm on the outside. I would like to understand a lot more than I do. And I understand you guys have been awesome with like some of the comments saying like you're supposed to be confused, like you're not supposed to have a full understanding. Doesn't mean I enjoy that. Doesn't mean I enjoy the reading experience feeling dumb. I want to see these magical like revelations come through and understand why it's so impactful. So I rated this like 4.5 stars. I still really loved it. I am absolutely going to continue in the series. What I appreciate so much about Brandon Sanderson is his tone. Like the humor of some of his characters that he throws in there. Sometimes there's banter, sometimes it's their like inner thoughts, but I love his characters. And Brandon Sanderson's known for like his magic and world building, and like that's not my favorite element in this book. I think that's what I'm saying because I don't understand it all yet. I love the characters, and I like that most of them have a good moral compass. They're trying to do the right thing. They might screw up sometimes, but they really want to look out for their people, and I kind of like that. So I feel good reading his books. I might feel dumb, but I feel good at the same time. The next book that I loved was The Dead Romantics, a paranormal romance by Ashley Poston. I'm going to be honest with you, this book does kick off with some elements that I absolutely hate in romance books. We have a main character who went through a breakup a year ago and still can't seem to function normally. She's a ghostwriter for a popular author, and she can't seem to do her job and write a book because she's so heartbroken from this breakup. And she also thinks that she deserves to be treated like crap because she's so insecure. She doesn't think she deserves better. I hate that. I hate when people think that their life is over because of a breakup. And I'm like, sis, it was a year ago. And yeah, the guy was awful. Like, you have every right to hate him, but like when your self-worth is just flushed down the toilet, oh, I can't stand that in romance books. But the book did work to redeem itself. What I enjoyed most about this is how it has this romance element to it, but it also layers in some heavier topics. So this book really deals with grief. And we have our main character who is going home because her father just passed away. And he ran like a family, I think it was like a family business actually, a mortuary. So like death is their business, and she's always grown up in this environment. But it's different when it's your beloved father, right? So she goes home to help with the arrangements. He left a will with like these insane requirements, like what he wanted for his own funeral. So she's trying to deal with this. And also, by the way, she can see dead people. And that's like her long-held secret. And so she actually moved away from this small town because everyone thought she was like so weird and creepy because of this gift. So she's going home. She doesn't want to be in this small town because nobody likes her. She hasn't been able to work in the past year, yada yada. But she can see dead people occasionally. And now, guess who shows up at the front door? It's the ghost of her very super hot editor. And that's where the love story is. It's the ghost of her editor and her. And like, he's helping her deal with this grief of losing her father, and so beautiful. And that's why I loved it. I loved, even though we have a main character who I really didn't like, and of course she's like the Lonely Island type where she thinks she has to do everything on herself. She doesn't want to ask anybody for help. All those super annoying things. I didn't like the female main character, but the other themes, the plot, the chemistry of the romance, all really led me to love The Dead Romantics. The next book that I loved was Remarkably Bright Creatures, a literary fiction by Shelby Van Pelt. Picking this book up, I did think it would be a little bit more of magical realism because I heard that we had a relationship between a woman and an octopus. and they like talk to each other. And that's why I picked this up, but that's not what happened. So the octopus can communicate, but mostly we just get very short chapters of him sharing his observations on humankind. He's not talking to anybody, and he'll communicate with the janitor or the cleaner or the caretaker at nighttime. He'll communicate with her by like wrapping his tentacle around her arm or like handing her something, like an item that he collected in his tank, but he's not talking to her. So have the right expectations going into this one. This is a literary fiction, so I was prepared that we would focus more on emotions and like writing style, and it definitely delivered on those things, particularly with the octopus's perspective, which was really cool. There's another element of a mystery to this as well. And the plot, I think with this mystery, which I'm not going to tell you more about because I don't want to spoil anything, I found the plot to be incredibly predictable. But I think that's okay. I think sometimes you just have to enjoy the journey, enjoy the ride, the characters, the bonds they form. And I love the older woman. I think she's in her early 70s, and she takes care of like washing the floors and washing the the glass on the tanks, and she's really passionate about what she does, and she's just trying to keep busy. And she's kind of struggling with like not having any family. She feels a little bit lonely. So there is an element of a found family that I liked in this book. There was one character POV that I couldn't stand, and it's this young guy who can't hold down a job, and he wants to track down his birth father because he wants to extort him for money. I didn't like him because I don't like the victim mentality where life happens to them and it's just they have bad luck and everybody else has good luck, like no accountability for themselves. I don't like that kind of character. So that was difficult to read his perspective because I wanted him to just go away. But everything else really made up for it. I enjoyed this book a lot. I think with those right expectations, this could be a great book for just about any reader. The next book I loved is the runner-up to my favorite book for the month. It is Sociopath, a memoir by Patrick Gagne. Ooh, this book was amazing, and this is an example of a nonfiction I really, really love reading because I love when a book opens my mind to a different human experience, something that I can't relate to or I haven't been knowingly exposed to. This is a memoir about a woman who grew up a sociopath, and this was not something that was widely discussed. She didn't really know what it meant, and she really had to pin down why she was different and find the information. She would like go to the library and it wasn't even listed in the topics for mental disorders. And so she really, really had to work at it. And when I talk about she was different, when she was a kid, she just didn't feel emotions. She would do something and her parents would be like, well, don't you feel sorry for what you did? She's like, no, why? She did lean towards violent tendencies, and she just felt this like growing tension. Like if she didn't act out in some kind of violent way, like she would just explode. So her approach was to do little minor things to keep that pressure away. And that was really interesting. And there was one example she was talking about when she was saying like she just doesn't feel emotions like everybody else. When she was a kid, she was like, she had two friends like come over, two neighborhood kids come over for a sleepover, and they wanted to go pull a prank. They wanted to like leave the house and go pull a prank. And she's sitting here like, what's the point? Like, it's mean-spirited, but I don't feel guilt. I just don't see the point. I don't see the point in doing this. Like, I want to go to sleep. So she had no emotions about it. She just didn't want to do it. So she's like, okay. She's like, you guys sneak out the back door and I'll go out the front door and we'll meet over here. So as soon as the two other kids left, she locked them out and then she went to bed. She wasn't trying to like do the right thing. She wasn't like, there was no emotion behind it. She just wanted to go to bed. And so the next day her mom was like yelling at her, like they were locked out all night. They were terrified. They were lost. It was dark. Like, don't you feel bad? And she was like, no, I was tired. So interesting learning about her perspective, her experiences, how other people viewed her, and how she came to terms with that. This memoir was so just groundbreaking for me to get this perspective and this insight. And I feel like I learned so much about something that I haven't experienced. I read a lot of great books this month, but there is one that really stuck with me the whole month. That book is Sex Cult Nun, a memoir by Faith Jones. I listened to this book on audio while I was doing some spring cleaning and filming a vlog reading cult books. And this was definitely an impactful read. I was very emotionally challenged by it. I had never heard of the Children of God cult that really existed. So a lot of this was brand new information for me, but also fit in like the stereotype of what I had for cults and how they exploited children and women. So it was like surprising and yet not surprising, if that makes sense. So we follow this girl through her childhood as a part of this cult, and it was very, very difficult. This is an extremely religious cult that believed that women's bodies were to be shared, and that's how you show your love for God, is giving your body to whoever wants it whenever they want it, regardless of how old you are. And that was challenging. That was very challenging. And in addition to not being able to have control over your reproductive rights, because hey, if you got pregnant, that was God's will, and you can't be on birth control because that's, saying that you know more than God, and it's not allowed. Seeing how they didn't have control over their own decisions in their lives for anything was so challenging. But this book made me see why that was appealing to them. They didn't have to worry about anything. They had such a tight-knit sense of community and family. They actually called themselves a family. But I could see the appeal of it because they didn't have to worry about it. Like, as you got older, you didn't have to worry about retirement, like saving for retirement, because they just believed that the family would take care of them. They were like such a confined community. They weren't on like a compound, but they did have homes where they all lived together, and you could like move to another country and move to a different home with people within the family. The community was so strong. Distorted. I don't know if I could recommend this book to everyone just because of the childhood exploitation. Because it was challenging. It's not even a trigger for me, but it was hard. It was hard to read, but I think it's so important to read and like understand. And I particularly found the end of the book so powerful. So when our author is an adult and she leaves the cult, not because she thinks anything is wrong, but because she just wants to get educated. She wants to go to college and she wants to have those experiences. That's why she leaves the cult. And that's where she starts to learn how distorted things were, how manipulated things were, and really came to terms with, actually, I don't even know if she came to terms. I think she still might be dealing with it a little bit. But how this leader of the cult was so charismatic and yet so distant. Like, she never met him. Her actual grandfather, who was the leader of the cult, she never met him. He was so distant, and yet he had this control over these people that was just astounding. I think that's what blows me away the most, is like how wild this life was by my standards, and I think a lot of people's standards. How wild this was, and influenced by someone that like they never met. It's just such an interesting exploration of like the human psyche, and the way it was written, I really understood. Like, I understand, but I don't understand, if that makes sense. Like, you could see how flabbergasted I am by this, because I really was introduced to a life that I had no understanding of, no concept of, and it blew me away. And it was so difficult to read, but so impactful that I finished it, and I was just sitting there like stunned. And my boyfriend was like, "What is going on with you?" I was like just sitting on the couch staring into space. The TV wasn't even on. He's like, "What's going on with you?" And I'm like, I just don't know what to think. I'm just processing everything. I was so stunned. And the book really did stick with me all month long. I read it like the first week of April, and it stuck with me all month. So when I'm ranking these books, this has to be the clear winner, because some were entertaining, some, made me feel lots of emotions, made me cry, and this book was just profound to me that it has to be my favorite read of the month. Well, those are my April reads ranked from worst to best for the month. And like I said, I'm pretty burnt out. pretty burnt out because that was a lot of pages. You can see how 16 bucks adds up to like the most pages I've ever read. Well, second most pages I've ever read. But I've blabbed enough. Thank you for hanging out with me so long in this video, talking about all these books. I hope you had a great reading month, and I will see you in the next video.